I've been sitting on this for too long, and I guess the weight of it finally crushed me. Maybe writing it down will make me feel a little less suffocated. I don't know. All I know is that it's a story that needs to be told, not just to clear my conscience, but because it's one of those messy, human situations you think only happen to other people, until it happens to you. When I first met Jake, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. He was everything I thought I wanted in a man: ambitious, charming, and devastatingly good-looking in that jeans and t-shirt, boy next door kind of way. We met at a 4th of July barbecue hosted by a mutual friend. He was flipping burgers, and I was trying to balance a solo cup and a plate of potato salad when he offered to help me. He had this easy confidence, the kind that made you want to lean in and listen to everything he had to say. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers, and by the end of the month, we were inseparable. The first few years of our marriage were great, like movie montage level great. We were the couple everyone envied, the ones who posted goofy pictures on Instagram with captions like, "He's my rock," or, "Couldn't do life without her." And for a while, I believed it. But things changed. Jake started working longer hours after his promotion. He wasn't the kind of guy to ignore his responsibilities, and that's part of what I loved about him, but the promotion came with stress and distance. He'd come home late, eat in silence, and then retreat to his office with his laptop. Weekends became more of the same, and I found myself spending more and more time alone. I tried to talk to him about it, of course. I'm not the kind of woman to just bottle things up. I told him I missed him, that I felt like we were becoming roommates instead of husband and wife. His response? A distracted, "I know, Jess. I'm sorry. Things will settle down soon." But they didn't. Months turned into a year, and soon, I stopped trying. It felt like I was screaming into a void. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that it was just a phase. But deep down, I felt invisible. Like I could disappear, and he wouldn't even notice. That's when I met Eric. He wasn't a planned detour. I wasn't out looking for attention or validation, though I guess, in hindsight, that's exactly what I needed. We met at a work event. Eric was one of those effortlessly funny guys, the kind who can make a dull meeting feel like a happy hour. He was a consultant working with my team, and at first, it was harmless. Just casual banter about the ridiculous office coffee and the overzealous HR emails. But then there was the night our team went out for drinks after a particularly grueling deadline. I was tipsy, not drunk, just that warm, giggly kind of buzzed. Eric and I ended up sitting in the corner of the bar, away from the group. I don't even remember what we talked about, but I do remember how it felt. Like someone was really seeing me for the first time in years. He didn't make a move that night, and neither did I. But something shifted. It started with texts. First about work, then about everything else. Eric would send me memes that made me laugh out loud in my office or ask about my weekend plans. It felt innocent at first, just two colleagues who clicked. But the texts started coming in later and later, and soon, they weren't about work at all. The first time he kissed me, it was raining. I know that sounds like a cliché, but it's true. We'd stayed late at the office, working on a presentation. I'd been venting about Jake, about how I felt like a ghost in my own marriage. Eric just listened, his eyes soft and understanding. When we left, he walked me to my car. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly, his lips were on mine, and the world fell away. The affair didn't last long. It wasn't some torrid, years-long secret, it was a spark that flared up and burned out within a few months. I broke it off when the guilt became unbearable. Eric understood. He wasn't looking to destroy my marriage, he was just as lost as I was, and for a brief moment, we found something in each other that we couldn't find anywhere else. But the damage was done. I thought I could keep it a secret. I told myself that as long as Jake never found out, we could rebuild. I threw myself into our marriage, trying to rekindle the connection we'd lost. For a while, I thought it was working. Jake started coming home earlier, asking about my day, even planning little weekend getaways for us. It felt like the light was coming back. Until last Thursday. I came home from work to find Jake sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey in front of him. He never drinks whiskey. The second I walked in, I knew something was wrong. He looked up at me, and in a voice that was calm but sharp enough to cut glass, he said, "Who's Eric?" My heart stopped. I don't know how he found out, maybe a text I forgot to delete, or maybe Eric slipped up. But it didn't matter. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. I confessed everything. I didn't see the point in lying. Jake deserved the truth, even if it shattered us. It's been a week since that night. Jake moved into the guest room, and we've been coexisting in this tense, heartbreaking limbo. He hasn't said much, just that he needs time to figure out what he wants. I want to fight for us, to prove that I'm still the woman he fell in love with. But I don't know if that's possible anymore. I'm not writing this for sympathy or absolution. I know I'm the villain in this story, and I'll carry the weight of what I did for the rest of my life. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that betrayal doesn't come out of nowhere. It's born from neglect, from loneliness, from 1,000 little cracks in the foundation that no one bothers to fix until it's too late. So, yeah. That's my story. It's messy and raw and not the kind of thing you admit to strangers on the internet. But maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe someone's on the edge of making the same mistakes I did, and they'll see this and stop. Or maybe I'm just trying to convince myself that I'm still worth something. Who knows? The days following Jake's discovery were a blur of half-finished conversations, quiet dinners, and the constant, suffocating tension of unspoken words. We still went through the motions, waking up, getting ready for work, nodding politely in passing, but everything was fractured. The space between us, once filled with laughter and warmth, had turned cold and hollow. I stayed up late most nights, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision that led me here. I'd go over what I said, what I could have done differently, and how blind I'd been to the slow unraveling of our marriage. I wanted to reach out to Jake, to say something, anything, but the words never came. And then, on a Saturday morning, he broke the silence. I was sitting at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. Jake walked in, his hair still messy from sleep. He poured himself a cup, leaned against the counter opposite me, and said, "I want to know why." My stomach clenched. I had been dreading this moment, but I also knew I owed him an answer. I took a deep breath. It wasn't about Eric, I said. It was about feeling like I didn't matter anymore. Like I was invisible. Jake flinched, but he didn't interrupt. His eyes stayed on mine, steady and unblinking, as I continued. "I tried to tell you," I said, my voice trembling. "I tried so many times, but it was like you were already gone." And then Eric showed up, and he listened. He saw me. And for a while, I forgot how lonely I was. The words hung in the air like a weight pressing down on both of us. Jake ran a hand through his hair and let out a bitter laugh. "You think I didn't notice," he said. "That I didn't feel it too? You think I wasn't drowning under the pressure to give you the life you deserved?" His voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time in years, I saw the vulnerability he always tried so hard to hide. It wasn't anger that filled his eyes, it was hurt. Deep, soul-crushing hurt. "I was trying, Jess," he said, his voice softer now. "Maybe not in the way you needed, but I was trying." Tears blurred my vision. "I know," I whispered. "And I should have tried harder too. I should have fought for us instead of running away." That conversation was the beginning of a long, painful process. We decided to go to therapy, not as a couple at first, but separately. Jake needed a space to process his anger and betrayal, and I needed to figure out why I let myself cross a line I swore I never would. The sessions were brutal, peeling back layers of resentment, guilt, and unmet expectations we'd both been carrying for years. In therapy, I realized that I'd been waiting for Jake to fix things, to be the one to bridge the gap between us. But relationships aren't one-sided. I hadn't just stopped fighting for our marriage, I'd stopped fighting for myself. I let the loneliness consume me instead of confronting it head-on. Jake, for his part, admitted that he'd buried himself in work because it was easier than dealing with the growing distance between us. I thought if I just worked hard enough, I could make everything okay, he told me one night after a particularly raw therapy session. But I was wrong. I see that now. It's been 6 months since that morning in the kitchen, and things are complicated. We're still in therapy, now as a couple. Some days, it feels like we're making progress, like we're learning how to be honest with each other again. Other days, it feels like we're just spinning our wheels, stuck in the same cycle of pain and doubt. The hardest part has been rebuilding trust. Jake says he forgives me, but I can see the hesitation in his eyes sometimes, like he's waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I don't blame him. I betrayed him in the worst way, and I know it'll take a long time for that wound to heal, if it ever does. As for Eric, I haven't spoken to him since the day I ended things. I don't regret the affair because it forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding, but I regret the hurt it caused. If I could go back, I'd do everything differently. I don't know what the future holds for Jake and me. Some days, I'm hopeful. I see glimpses of the love we used to share, and I think maybe, just maybe, we can find our way back to each other. Other days, I wonder if the damage is too deep, if we're just delaying the inevitable. What I do know is this: relationships aren't fairy tales. They're messy and imperfect, full of mistakes and second chances. And sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is stay and fight for something that feels broken. So that's where we are, two people trying to figure out if love is enough to overcome betrayal. It's not the ending I imagined when we said, I do, but maybe it's not the ending at all. Maybe it's just the middle of a story that's still being written. I guess we'll see. A month after we started therapy, Jake and I decided to try something new, taking walks together every evening after dinner. It wasn't a big thing, just a half-hour stroll around the neighborhood, often in silence, but it felt like neutral ground. There was something about the act of moving side by side that made the conversations flow easier, like we were working through our problems one step at a time. One evening, as we walked under the dim glow of the streetlights, Jake broke the silence. "Do you ever regret marrying me?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the sound of our footsteps. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I stopped walking and turned to him. "No," I said firmly. "Never. I regret what I did, Jake. I regret hurting you. But marrying you? Loving you? That's never been something I regret." He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded and started walking again. I followed, my heart heavy with the weight of the question I didn't dare ask: did he regret marrying me? The thing about rebuilding a relationship after betrayal is that it forces you to confront parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. Therapy made me realize how much I'd been keeping score in our marriage, counting the times Jake came home late, the missed anniversaries, the nights spent scrolling on his phone instead of talking to me. I saw his neglect as proof that he didn't care, but the truth was more complicated. Jake wasn't a villain. He was just as lost as I was, trying to navigate the demands of work and life and love without a map. And while I hated admitting it, I hadn't exactly been a perfect partner either. I'd expected him to meet all my emotional needs without considering what he might need from me in return. One day in therapy, our counselor asked us to write down 3 things we loved about each other, qualities that made us fall in love in the first place. It felt stupid at first, like some cheesy exercise from a self-help book, but when we shared our lists, I started crying. Jake's list was simple but heartfelt: my laugh, my determination, the way I always sang along, badly, to every song on the radio. It was a reminder that even after everything, he still saw the good in me. And my list? It was a reminder to myself of the man I fell in love with, the one who used to leave sticky notes with doodles on the fridge and make me laugh so hard I'd snort. Things weren't perfect, but they were better. We started having real conversations again, not just about logistics or therapy, but about our dreams, our fears, and the little, stupid things that made us laugh. Jake told me about a coworker who microwaved fish in the office kitchen, and I shared a story about accidentally sending a typewritten email to my entire team. It felt good to laugh together again, even if the laughter was tinged with sadness. But then, just when I thought we were starting to heal, I found something that shattered me all over again. It was a Tuesday evening, and Jake had left his phone on the counter while he went to take a shower. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I only glanced at the screen because it lit up with a notification. But what I saw made my stomach drop. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message read, "Hey, can we talk? I've been thinking about you." My hand started shaking. I told myself it was probably nothing, a wrong number, maybe, or an old friend. But the paranoia I'd been carrying since Jake found out about Eric flared up, and before I could stop myself, I unlocked his phone. The text was from a woman named Megan. There wasn't much, just a short thread of messages that didn't say much on the surface. But the tone felt intimate. Familiar in a way that made my heart race with dread. One message stuck out, "I know you're going through a lot, but I'm here if you need me." I stood there, frozen, staring at the screen until Jake came out of the bathroom. When he saw the phone in my hand, his face went pale. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Who's Megan?" Jake didn't answer right away. He just stood there, a towel draped around his shoulders, water dripping onto the floor. Finally, he sighed and said, "She's a coworker. We've been talking." Talking? I repeated, my voice rising. "Talking about what?" "About everything," he said quietly. "About us. About how messed up everything feels. She's just a friend, Jess. That's all." I wanted to believe him, but after what I'd done, after the lies I'd told, I couldn't. "Do you have feelings for her?" I asked, my chest tightening. Jake hesitated, and that hesitation felt like a knife to the gut. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe. But nothing's happened. I swear." That night, we had the fight to end all fights. I accused him of betraying me, of seeking comfort from someone else when he should have been working on us. He fired back, saying that after what I did, I had no right to judge him. It was ugly and raw, and by the end of it, we were both crying. Jake moved out the next day. It's been 2 months since he left, and I still don't know where we stand. We see each other in therapy, but our sessions feel more like post-mortems than attempts to rebuild. Jake says he's not ready to come home, and I'm not sure I'm ready for him to either. We've both broken something in each other, and I don't know if it can ever be fixed. I still love him, though. God, do I love him. But maybe love isn't always enough. So that's where the story ends, for now, anyway. 2 people who loved each other, hurt each other, and are trying to figure out what's next. Maybe we'll find our way back to each other. Or maybe this is the beginning of a different kind of story, one where we learn to let go. Either way, I'm holding on to hope. Because that's all I have left. It's strange how endings creep up on you. You think you'll see them coming, that there'll be a moment, a sign, something dramatic that screams this is it. But that's not how it works. For Jake and me, the end came quietly, like the last embers of a fire burning out. After Jake moved out, we kept up with therapy for a while, but it became clear that we weren't really there to fix anything. We were there to untangle the knot of our shared lives, to figure out who owed what and who deserved what. Every session felt more like a negotiation than a reconciliation. One day, as we sat across from each other in the sterile therapy office, Jake turned to me and said, "I don't think I can do this anymore." I knew what he meant, but I still asked, "Do what?" "This," he said, gesturing between us. trying to pretend like we can go back to how things were. I don't think we can. I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. I know, I whispered. And that was it. No screaming, no slamming doors, no dramatic goodbye. Just two people acknowledging that their story had run its course. The weeks that followed were some of the loneliest of my life. I stayed in the house, surrounded by the ghosts of what Jake and I used to be. The couch where we used to curl up and watch movies felt too big, the bed too empty. Even the kitchen felt wrong without him stealing bites of whatever I was cooking. For a while, I thought about reaching out to him, just to talk, to hear his voice, but I stopped myself every time. He needed space, and maybe I did too. One day, while sorting through a box of old photos, I found the Polaroid we'd taken on our first anniversary. We were at a park, sitting on a blanket with a bottle of cheap wine. Jake was grinning at the camera, his arm around my shoulders, while I held up a slice of cake like it was a trophy. We looked so happy, so in love. Looking at that photo, I didn't feel regret. I felt gratitude. For all the mistakes we made, Jake and I had been good once. We'd loved each other deeply, and that love had shaped me in ways I didn't fully understand until it was gone. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of what used to be. It was time to start over. The next few months were a whirlwind of change. I sold the house, too many memories, and moved into a small apartment downtown. I got a dog, a scruffy little mutt named Ollie who immediately became my shadow. I started taking yoga classes, joined a book club, and even signed up for a pottery workshop. At first, it felt like I was just going through the motions, but slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Not the version of me who was Jake's wife or Eric's secret, but the version of me I'd forgotten about, the one who loved to dance in the kitchen, who sang, badly, in the shower, who laughed until she cried at dumb jokes. Jake and I finalized our divorce a year after he moved out. It was amicable, sad, but amicable. We met at a coffee shop to sign the papers, and for the first time in months, we really talked. Not about blame or betrayal, but about life. About how he'd started running in the mornings and how I'd taken up painting. About the people we were becoming. As we stood up to leave, he said, "I hope you find what you're looking for, Jess." "You too," I said, and I meant it. It's been 3 years now, and life looks nothing like I thought it would. I'm single, but not lonely. I've got Ollie, a handful of close friends, and a job that keeps me busy. I'm not perfect, but I'm learning to forgive myself for the mistakes I made. Sometimes I think about Jake. I wonder if he ever thinks about me, if he's found someone new. I hope he has. I hope he's happy. And as for me? I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with not knowing. Life isn't about perfect endings. It's about learning to live with the mess and finding beauty in the chaos. So here I am, still standing, still growing, and finally at peace with the story I've lived. Maybe it wasn't a fairy tale, but it was mine. And that's enough. The end.